thing here, but nobody's any better at this than you are.
That's fine. Take a deep breath.
Give him hell at the end. You like this?
Fight like hell like we do every week. You are the best here.
Brett, be affirmative. You told me to get on.
Info. Ready. Ready. Go slow. Green, green, green. Lock it down, lock it down.
I'm destroyed, and I just got drove through like 6 times on the 14th. What the f*** is he thinking? That is the stupidest thing I've seen in my career. Literally.
Everything you described is accurate. Haven't even finished the second stage yet. Half the field's wrecked.
Hell yeah.
11 got it. Proud of you there, Matt. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day. Great work, my man. Great work.
Keep putting yourself in position. We'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
Therefore, great job, guys.
And welcome back to Racing in the Draft. My name is Mark. Welcome to this week. We head to Bristol Motor Speedway. Officially kind of our first real short track. We kind of had a short track last week. But this week, definitely headed to one of the toughest racetracks on the circuit. Half mile, the fastest half mile. All sorts of nicknames for this place. But it's Bristol, baby. Quite excited for this weekend. Truck race was very entertaining. We saw Kyle Busch almost get the win, but couldn't quite pull it off there at the end. So we'll have to wait and see. Practice and qualifying was also extremely interesting with the resin or whatever they put at the bottom of the racetrack to make it a little grippier on the bottom. So it had 2 distinct grooves, but the track temperatures kind of screwed around with it a little bit. But either way, we'll get more into that as we get into tonight's breakdown for tomorrow's Food City 500. But before we do that, let's head back to the desert one last time to talk about the Shriners Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway, where Christopher Bell kind of stunk up the show a little bit. I knew the Toyotas were going to be good. I just thought Denny Hamlin would have a better day than he did. He did spin himself out, so there is that. But Christopher Bell just putting on a clinic, especially in stage 2 of the Shiner Children's 500. I mean, it wasn't a bad race. It wasn't a great race. It was just a normal, typical Phoenix race. Don't think the new package did much, and after listening to everybody give their input on what they thought about the new short track package, I don't think until they change the tires or change the engine that it's going to change much. I also think that they could just take all of the underbody off of these cars, which has a lot of the downforce and handling characteristics of this car. I think if you took those out, we would potentially have better racing also. Haven't heard anybody talk about that, but I think that is playing a little bit, mostly, especially when cars are trying to make a pass. I think it's could make for better racing if they took a lot of the diffusers and stuff off the bottom of that car. Either way, let's look at our optimal lineups and see where I hit and where I didn't hit. It was kind of a mediocre week for me. I did okay, but it was kind of surprising. I mean, 3 of the guys that made the optimal lineup I didn't have, but most of the drivers who were just outside the optimal lineup I did have. So I ended up losing a little bit, but I still was pretty spot on with what kind of my thought processes were, and taking more of the guys that started up front. I just didn't expect as many guys from 11th through, 18th to do as well as they did, especially when it came to Draftkings points. But either way, Christopher Bell, of course, nobody really dominated this race, Christopher Bell kind of dominated the last, I don't know, 70 or 80 laps of this race. But other than that, I mean, the laps led were definitely spread out, and the fast laps were kind of spread out. I mean, Christopher Bell and Martin Truex Jr. both had really good fast cars, led laps, had fast laps, and Denny Hamlin led the most laps and was not in the optimal lineup, even though he did have 53.85 points. I mean, that would have put him in here, and you could have substituted him in for, Martin Truex Jr. and still finished probably in the money range. So I didn't quite do real well at the very top of the optimal lineup, but I did do fairly well for the weekend. Still lost a little bit, but that's okay. That's what good weeks and bad weeks will do. You hopefully outweigh the good weeks with the bad weeks. But our optimal lineup challenge is definitely kind of getting tight up top again. Bubba Wallace, Noah Gragson, Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Ty Gibbs, all with 2 of the 4 races making the optimal lineup. And we've got a whole host of drivers with 1. And we're actually into the second side of this after only 4 races. So we are definitely putting a lot of spreading the wealth out when it comes to DraftKings, which does make finding that optimal lineup a little bit harder, but it's not supposed to be something easy to hit. I think I've only ever had 2 true optimal lineups. Out of the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing DraftKings on a regular basis for NASCAR, so it's hard to hit. What you're trying to do is just make sure you've got 4 to 5 of the drivers in the optimal lineup. But either way, we head to Bristol. A ton of laps. We absolutely have to look at 1, if not 2, drivers to be dominators for this race. Laps led and fast laps, and typically the driver up front until they catch the lap traffic definitely has the fastest laps to the field. So finding that leader, who's going to lead the most laps and who's going to stay up there most of the race, is definitely kind of what we need to look for. Place differential will play a little bit of a part here, especially since we've got some guys who just absolutely missed on their qualifying, and we'll get to them in the driver-by-driver breakdown. But either way, let's talk about Bristol. Oops, there's my mess up. I knew I was going to have one. It is not the Bass Pro Shops. That's the fall race. This is the Food City 500. Different logo. I always have something messed up, and I thought I got them all fixed, but I didn't. This is a steep, short track. It's 0.533 miles in length, 26 to 30 degrees of progressive banking in the corners. The race length is 500 points. As I was saying earlier, Dominator points are 350. A ton of Dominator points are available here. Laps led from that Dominator are 125 and fast laps of 225. It is absolutely imperative to have 1, if not 2, Dominators for this race. Other track comparisons, even though there's nothing really like Bristol, I mean, Dover's kind of twice the size, and it's also a concrete track. Martinsville is as short as Bristol, but the banking's nowhere close, and it does have concrete corners. Nashville is just a huge concrete track, and then kind of because of the banking situation at Darlington, it kind of plays, so you could kind of take a little piece of all these and put them into Bristol. Either way, our optimal lineup from the previous Bristol races, now we were only running on the concrete for 1 race per year, and that was typically the night race. In the fall. In the spring, we were running on dirt for the last few years. So we only have 1 race per year to kind of look at, which is okay. It still gives us enough information. And our optimal lineup from the 2023 race, as we see, I mean, 2 dominators here. You had Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin leading 187 or 142 laps. I mean, you can see what the Dominator points get you. I mean, it's 115 points for these 2. And the next closest was Ty Gibbs at 85. I mean, one thing to kind of look at here, we had 3 Toyotas at the top of the heap. And then we had 3 place differential guys. Todd Gillen, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Carson Hocevar. I guess Carson Hocevar really wasn't a place differential. He only went from 16th to 11th. But since he was $6,000, he made it in. our 2022 race, as we see again, I mean, pretty much two and a half dominators. Chris Buescher, Christopher Bell, Brad Keselowski, all leading lots of laps and fast laps. And in fact, Brad Keselowski even lost 3 positions and still made the optimal lineup. Now, part of it was he was only $6,400. So there is that. And then our 2021 race, one dominator, another almost dominator with Kevin Harvick leading 71 laps. So we're definitely trying to find these guys that are going to lead a ton of laps. And as you see, it's the guys that start up front, stay up front. The guys that can make up a little ground from the back are something we definitely need to keep an eye on and take a look at. And then we get down here to the 2020 race, kind of the same thing, 2 dominators. So as I was saying, we're looking for that 1 to 2 dominators for this race. As we look at our breakdown of the top 15 point getters and where they started, so we kind of have an idea of what we're looking for. Are we looking for a bunch of back markers? Are we looking for guys that are going to start up front, stay up front? Are we looking for some guys that may be in the middle that have just, decent days and keep their car clean and have a decent finish? It is kind of a start in the top 20, stay in the top 20 type of a race. As you can see, our Bristol averages 2.2 guys that start in the top 5 have the highest point getter in Draftkings. 6 through 10 has 2.8 drivers. So, I mean, right there alone, 5 drivers making the top 15 in points, and then 5 more coming from 11 through 20th. So we're really kind of looking and kind of circling the top 20 drivers and where they're starting. Don't have a whole lot of place differential. I mean, as you can see, 1.6 drivers come from 31st starting position or worst. We're averaging 1 guy that starts on the front row per race. So when we look at this, we're looking really kind of at who's starting in the top 10 or top 5, which are these 2 top boxes here, then 11 through 20. And then I kind of use my ranking system to kind of pick out who I think might be the best in the top 5, and then 6 through 10, 11 through 20, and 21 through 30. Now, we do have a couple guys, like I said earlier, that really missed in qualifying. And I think kind of what happened was they run 2 different sets of practice and qualifying groups. They have Group A and Group B. Group A came out, and it was pretty... The sun was still shining completely on the track, which was heating the track up a little bit and heating up the resin or PJ1. I'm not sure what they're calling it. They said it was something different that they hadn't used before, but it needs heat to really get sticky and active. And they had just finished the truck practice and qualifying when Group A came out for their warm-up laps. And with the full sun, that traction compound was still pretty hot. So that first group that came out had really, really great speed. And then all of a sudden, Group 2 came out, and the sun was not directly on half of the track, which then the traction compound kind of cooled off a little bit, and Group 2 was drastically slower and had much worse handling cars. And you had cars that were within the same team, same organizations, that were just drastically off. And then we get to qualifying, and the same thing kind of happened. The Group A qualifiers were not as fast. The Group B qualifiers were about where they were in practice. But Group A definitely did not qualify near as well. And that really kind of threw some things askew. I mean, we'll kind of see that when we get into the driver-by-driver breakdown, and you'll see some guys that practiced really well and then just missed qualifying because they would go into turns 1 or turn 3 and the car just wouldn't stick, and they would just slide up the track, and they had to catch the car, which that point slows their lap speeds down. And the guys in Group B who kind of were used to that and had set their car up for qualifying because that they had just practiced on something like that, qualified a little better. So we had some different dynamics going on with qualifying, which kind of maybe to an advantage for some drivers because the track's going to be full sunshine when they hit the track tomorrow. And it's going to take a couple laps to get that stuff activated and going. So we could see some sloppiness, at least for the first few laps as they get going. So let's get into the driver-by-driver breakdown. Kyle Larson is the most expensive driver on the board at $11,500. He is starting in the 10th position. The next line down here, and like I said, I'm going to kind of go in detail for the first driver, and then we'll kind of skim over and hit some highlights for each driver. If we went in detail for each driver, we'd be here for 2 hours, and I tried to make this thing only an hour. But Kyle Larson, he qualified in the 10th starting position. He was 17th in single lap practice speeds. He did 34 total laps of practice, and he was 29th on a 10-lap consecutive average, but he was way off on that 10-lap average. So I couldn't quite tell from watching qualifying. I think his 10th lap, he either slipped or in a turn, or he had to check up. I knew there was one point where he had to check up for Ty Gibbs, who had hit the wall in front of him. But either way, in the last 5 races, so the 5 races we just kind of looked at, the Bristol 2023, 22, 21, fall of 20, and spring of 20, Kyle Larson has only raced in 3 of those because he was under suspension for 2020. He does have 1 win in 3 of those starts, and all 3 of those starts he has finished in the top 5. He has a 93.0 Draftkings average and a 2.7 average finish for those 3 races. So you can see he's got a little bit of place differential. His average finishes in the top 5. He finished second last fall in this race, and a total of 15 starts, and almost a third of the time he's finishing in the top 5. Over half the time he's finishing in the top 10. So great starting spot, great potential for Kyle Larson to have a solid day, if not even potentially go after a win. So with that being said, all of these factors kind of get figured in, and then I look at practice and qualifying, then I get a ranking system, and Kyle Larson comes in first on my ranking system. Lost profit. Hey, you made it. Yes, I'm feeling good this week. Can't decide whether to lean Toyota or not. I think I want to run Larson and Blaney. Yeah, I mean, Blaney hands down was the absolute fastest in practice, and when we get to Blaney, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about what Blaney's doing. Kyle Larson, as we are just now talking about, is super consistent, always kind of seeming to running in the top 5. This kind of track really kind of plays into Kyle Larson's wheelhouse, kind of like the mile and a half, but this. And there's a reason why they put dirt on Bristol, because even on concrete, this thing kind of drives slightly like a dirt track. The groove moves around a lot. You can really slide the car through the corners. You can kind of do some slide jobs. There's lots of things that you can do while racing Bristol, and it kind of falls into Kyle Larson's wheelhouse. So I definitely like the Kyle Larson play. I do like the Blaney play a lot. But there's some other drivers that I think potentially could end up having pretty decent runs. But either way, over here to the top right, I do have him ranked first on my ranking system, and 35 to 40% usage, and I do run 40 different lineups. So this kind of gives you an indication of how much of a usage I have for Kyle Larson. Denny Hamlin, 11,200, starting in the 3rd position. And as you can see, he qualified much better than he practiced. Can't remember exactly. I need to start putting down what practice session these guys were in. I think he was in the 2nd practice session because they were so much slower than the 1st set. But Denny kind of also didn't seem to be his car didn't seem to be handling well in practice. Well, they definitely got it worked correctly out, and he's qualified in the third position. He did win here last fall, and he beat everybody's favorite driver, as he likes to tell everyone. But an 11.4 average finish, starting third. I mean, this is somebody that could easily start up front, stay up front, and kind of just be there all day long. Do I think he's going to have anything for who I think might win the Kyle Larson or Blaney pick? Maybe. Depends on how pit stops go and how much the track changes through the course of the race. But I do have him ranked second. I've got him in 35% of my lineups. I do like the Kyle Larson or the Denny Hamlin play also this weekend. Christopher Bell, our winner from last week. Momentum is always a key in this sport, and Christopher Bell has definitely got some momentum behind him. He is starting 12th. He was 8th in single lap practice. He was 4th in 10 lap. So he unloaded pretty fast. He did the same thing last week. Now, his car's not quite as fast as it was last week, where he was top of the charts in practice and just missed a little bit in qualifying. This time around, he's going to have to kind of figure out better what he needs to do to get up front, which, I mean, is very possible. And his pit crew seems to be hitting on all cylinders, where last year they kind of struggled. But in the last, 5 races, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, 4 top 20s, 15.2 average finish. Pretty good. William Byron, 10,700, starting in 8th. He must have been, he was in the second group, and I think he was the fastest Chevy in the second group. He was 6th in single lap speed, 5th in 10 lap consecutive average, so really good speeds in practice. And he did pretty well in qualifying also, starting 8th. So definitely kind of starting up front, practiced up front, and hopefully he can stay up front. I have him ranked 8th on my usage chart. I've got him in 20 to 25%. In the last 5 races, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. So pretty good finishes, pretty good average finishes. Starting 8th, he's somebody who could definitely be there at the end. Andrew B. might cap everyone at 30%. Majeski killed me tonight. Yeah, Majeski definitely kind of hurt me a little bit tonight, but I kind of had a feeling that was just going to be Christian Eckes' to lose. He just is so good at Bristol, and with him qualifying up front, I knew that the only guy out there that was going to have a chance to get him was going to be Kyle Busch, and once he got the lead from Kyle Busch, it was, the only way that Kyle Busch was going to pass him if he wrecked him. And Kyle Busch even kind of said that at the end. He was like, "What, if you had another lap, what would have happened? Because we would have wrecked." And you got to leave it to Kyle Busch for being honest. So, yeah, it's going to be another one of these races that I think it's going to be imperative to take quite a few guys up front. They're going to get up front. They're going to stay up front. Bristol is a little bit of a tricky place to pass. Unless we kind of get some off-cycle pit stops, and we get some pit position makeups and things like that. So I like William Byron. I like where he's starting. He's not my favorite driver for this weekend, but he definitely is probably in the top 10. In fact, he's ranked 8th on my ranking. Ryan Blaney, who potentially could easily be... This could be Ryan Blaney's show just to stink up tomorrow. Qualified in first, practiced in first, 10-lap consecutive average in first. Now, his average finishes aren't great here. This is not his best short track. But remember what he did at Martinsville in the fall last fall. He ran 22nd in this race last fall, but Ryan Blaney is probably the hottest, most consistent driver in NASCAR right now, and he's just coming off of that championship from last year. He ran really well last week. He's just peaking right now, and when a guy's peaking, you typically don't go off of him too much. So I definitely like the Ryan Blaney play a lot this week. I think he could easily lead 150 or 200 laps, which if he does that, even if he happens to fall or third or fourth, he's still going to make the optimal lineup. So I definitely like the Ryan Blaney play a lot for tomorrow. Kyle Busch, 10,200. I mean, this is Kyle Busch's track. It's probably one of his best tracks. Recently, it's not been as kind to Kyle Busch, but I mean, Kyle Busch has something to prove right now because they have definitely kind of fallen off a little bit this year, and no better place for him to kind of make a resurgence other than at Bristol, one of his favorite tracks. He is starting 14th now. He practiced in second, and his 10-lap consecutive average, he fell to 18th. So kind of the long-run speed was quite not what he wanted. But starting in 14th, there's a little bit of place differential here. And as when I looked at my charts for the top 15 points getters for each race, kind of that sweet spot was between 11 through 20. And Kyle Busch is starting between 11 through 20. So I definitely think having ownership of the 20-25% is probably just about right. I could even see going a little bit more with Kyle Busch. Chris Buescher, who has won here in the past, $9,800, just missed qualifying. He charged into turn 3 and washed up the track on his first lap, which then created a slower lap in lap 1, and because it was in turn 3 and turn 4, he didn't have the speed coming to the start of his second lap, so he was just not any faster in his second lap, so he's starting in 34th. Now, his practice speeds were okay. He was 12th in single lap, 8th in 10-lap consecutive average. He does have a win here in the last 5 races. I think it was 2022 Chris Buescher won this race. I think it was 21 where Kyle Larson won this race. And he finished 4th in the race last year. So in the last 2 races, he's finished 1st and 4th. 11.8 average finish. This is one of his better tracks. And last week kind of saw a resurgence of RFK racing with Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher both having really good finishes last week. So with that being said, I definitely like the Chris Buescher play. Tons of place differential potential here with Chris Buescher. Ranks 4th on my ranking systems. I have 25 to 30% ownership in Chris Buescher. Joey Logano, 9,500. Probably the second unluckiest guy in NASCAR right now, but he kind of does it to himself a little bit. First being Austin Dillon, who just cannot seem to get a break to go his way. I mean, Joey Logano qualified fairly quick. He practiced quick. He was part of the first group. I do remember that. His practice speeds were 5th in single lap, 6th in 10-lap consecutive average. But if we look at what have you done for me lately? Well, lately you haven't been very good in race trim. You've done really well in qualifying, but in race trim you haven't done very well. And what have you done lately at Bristol? Not a whole lot. 20.8 average finish. He finished 34th in the race here last year. Things just aren't headed in the right direction with Joey Logano. I've got some usage on him, but I'm only at 10 to 15%. And somebody who's starting in the top 10 or top 5 even. I mean, if he was racing better, maybe, but until he can change the trend of what he's done lately, I potentially am going to hold off on Joey Logano for a while. Andrew says, I like Buescher. Can he pay off at that price? You would have to sacrifice a potential dominator. I don't know if you necessarily have to sacrifice a dominator for that. Let me kind of see real quick. How does this end up playing? So let's see. If we run Chris Buescher at $9,800, put him up here. We both said we like Kyle Larson as a potential dominator and Ryan Blaney as a potential dominator. What does that leave us? $18,200 or about $6,000 per. Well, let's see. You've got Hocevar starting in 35th, who's been actually finishing in the top 15 pretty consistently. We got $2,400 left. We go with an Austin Dillon as a place differential. Also, I don't like running three guys that are starting in the 30s. But we're just kind of doing this to see. And then an AJ Allmendinger potentially. Or even a John Hunter Nemechek may not be bad. See what that does. So, I mean, that you could still do a Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, and a Chris Buescher. Three guys that run really well at Bristol. A Carson Hocevar that shouldn't finish 35th, but he's going to be starting back there in the muck. And Carson Hocevar also has a tendency to get a little impatient. So maybe the Carson Hocevar play is not great, but starting 35th, there's not a whole lot of room to go down. And Austin Dillon, like I said, has had the worst luck known to any NASCAR driver to start a year. So I don't love the play, but you could potentially fit that with not bad. The problem is you are literally betting the farm on some weird things happening. So it fits. Don't know if I love it or not. Brad Keselowski, 9,200. Like I said just a second ago, RFK Racing had a much better week last week than they had in the last since the start of the year. Brad's got a win here in the last 5 races. He finished 8th in the fall race here. Starting in 17th, he was 21st in single lap, 26th in 10 laps, so kind of qualified close to where he practiced. I mean, there's a little bit of place differential, and he's kind of starting that sweet spot that I really, really like in that teens and even a little bit of high teens. Brad typically finishes pretty well at Bristol. I mean, in the last 5 races, 4 top 20s. So, don't love it, don't hate it. 20-25% usage on Brad K. Brad's going to win a race this year. Just like I think Ty Gibbs is going to win a race this year. And tomorrow could potentially be that if the cards fall right for either one of them. So I've got some usage on Brad K. Tyler Reddick, $9,000, starting 23rd. This short tracks are Tyler Reddick's Achilles heel. He did okay last week at Phoenix, but this Bristol, Martinsville, Richmond type of track does not favor Tyler Reddick very well. He does much better on road courses and mile and a halves. Very similar to his teammate Bubba Wallace. Short tracks are not quite. Tyler Reddick actually does worse at short tracks than Bubba Wallace does. So starting 23rd, he's got an 18.4 average finish over the last 5 races here. He's only got 1 top 5, which says 1 top 10, only 3 top 20s. Starting 23rd, there is some room here. And I'm probably on the low end of that 20-25% usage. I don't know if I love the Tyler Reddick play as much as my usage. And I've always said with a caveat, my usage might drop a little bit on some of these guys. After I do these videos, I kind of look at stuff and go, you know what? I think that I might have too much usage. So this one, maybe he probably falls in the 15-20% usage, especially for $9,000. I would much rather take a Chris Buescher than a Tyler Reddick. Just better average finishes, does better at short tracks, more place differential, also more opportunity to get stuck in the muck, but Tyler Reddick's kind of right in the middle of the muck. So, that usage is probably going to come down a little bit. Martin Truex Jr., who does like short tracks, does like Bristol, does not have a win yet at Bristol. I thought he had a win. Nope, no win at Bristol yet. Okay. Really right? I need to check myself on that. I don't know why I felt like he had a win here. Let's see. If anybody is not familiar with racingreference.com, this site is where I get almost all of my data. Truex Martin Truex Jr. Well, he's got the dirt Bristol truck race win. Results by track. Yeah, Bristol. Nope, no wins. Not even on dirt. He does have the dirt truck win. So yeah. But he does have a Martinsville. He's got 3 Martinsville wins. He's got 3 Richmond wins. So yeah, he's good on short tracks either way. But I do love racingreference.com. It is a great place for stats and data. So, I mean, a 21.2 average finish over the last 5 races here at Bristol. Not great. Finished 19th in the fall, starting 11th. So, I mean, this could be another one that I could fall off a little bit from the 20-25%. It could end up being 15-20% on usage. Practice speeds were not great. No chance of real rain happening tomorrow, so I don't think this thing gets pushed to Monday, which is always a helpful hit for Martin. Even though this is a small Dover style track, and he always races Dover really well. Yeah, I don't love the Martin Truex Jr. play starting 11th, especially with practice speeds and things falling off. Now, he ended up almost winning the race last week, but Ross Chastain, 8,500. Really fast in practice, 4th in single lap, 2nd in 10 lap consecutive average. His finishes aren't great here to 14.3, but he absolutely screwed his qualifying lap up. Both of them. The track changed way more than I think that he needed, and was not ready for that change. So starting in 36, somebody who was practicing in the top 5, has an average of 14.3. I definitely like the Ross Chastain play. The problem is we've got a ton of guys starting in the back that have potential of having really good days. So I think our 1.8 average starting spot in the 30s might be on the low side. We could have 2 or 3. We could easily have the Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, Ty Gibbs. There's a lot of guys that are starting in the 30s who have the potential to have a pretty good day. Chase Elliott next in line here at $8,300, starting in 5th. Practice speeds were in 16th and 20th. On 10 lap consecutive average, he's got a 12.6 average finish here. I just don't know if I'd liked the speed of Chase Elliott. And I haven't liked the speed of Chase Elliott so far this year. He's been middle of the pack. Last week at Phoenix was a little bit better, but still was not what we're used to seeing from Chase Elliott. Now, do I still think Chase Elliott gets a win? Yeah, we're headed to COTA next weekend. Probably one of his best tracks. So COTA will definitely be something to watch for Chase Elliott. This week, starting in 5th, we're going to need some things to happen for Chase Elliott to make the optimal lineup. I don't think this is the best play of guys that are starting in the top 5. Yeah, so that my 20-25% usage is probably going to come down a little bit. Probably in the 15 to 20% range, maybe even the 10 to 15% range. Don't think I love this play. Now Chase Elliott he definitely has a win here at Bristol. Am I having whatever amnesia and just thinking these guys have won these tracks and I just can't remember? Chase. No, he doesn't have a win here either. Gosh, that's so weird. He's got 4 top 5s though. I think it was that race with Kevin Harvick that I thought he was going to win that he didn't end up winning. Either way, no wins at Bristol. Good finishes though, 12.6 average finish, but starting in 5th, I don't know if I love that. Ty Gibbs, $8,000, starting in 34th. He was part of that second group that came out that everybody was slower than Group 1, and Ty Gibbs was even worse. he just went charging in to turn 1 or turn 3 on his first lap and slid right up the track and into the wall. I don't know if something was going on with the braking, but they didn't seem to be too concerned with it. Ends up qualifying 34th. They'll get that car fixed. I'm not worried that he's going to have handling issues for tomorrow per se. Now, do I think Ty Gibbs, since he's stuck in the muck, he's going to have to show a lot of patience, kind of like a Carson Hocevar is going to have to show a lot of patience to move up through the field. But there are a lot of guys that are starting up front that shouldn't be starting up front either. So it's going to be an interesting race to watch with these guys coming from the back and how patient and not patient they'll be. So I definitely like the place differential play with Ty Gibbs. He's going to be probably heavily owned because of it. He finished 5th in the fall race last year. So we'll have to keep an eye out for Ty Gibbs. Bubba Wallace, 7,700, starting in 9th. He was very quick in practice, 3rd in single lap, 3rd in 10 lap consecutive average. He ran the most practice laps of anybody at 56 laps. I think that was probably the most you could run in a 20-minute session. But short tracks are not, he's kind of like Tyler Reddick. This is just not completely his wheelhouse. He's getting better and better, but he has had a tendency to struggle getting and running up front at short tracks. He ends up having an okay finish, but starting in 9th, you need to be better than okay. Ranked 15th, 15 to 20%, maybe a little on the high side. So I don't hate the play, don't love the play here. I just think there's potentially better that are around him. I mean, Alex Bowman's one of them. And Bowman's not great at Bristol, but he's starting 29th. So if he gets and finishes closest to Bubba Wallace, he's going to beat him in points just from place differential. Alex Bowman's practice speeds were not great. I think he was in the second grouping. 28th in single lap, did not do a 10-lap consecutive average, so we don't know anything about his long run speed. Average finish here, 20.6 over the last 5 races, 13 total starts. His average finish is a little better at 18.7. He comes in 19th in my ranking system. So, and he has struggled ever since he broke his back last year. So, kind of until Alex Bowman starts to show a little bit more speed on a consistent basis, I'd easily see fading off of Alex Bowman. So he is in a good spot for place differential this week, but I mean, I'm not sure that's going to be great if you start 29th and you finish 20th. That's not going to be enough. Chase Briscoe, who is really good on short tracks. Not so much the other ones. He's decent at road courses, but he's definitely not a mile-and-a-half type guy. And SHR has definitely been showing much better speed this year, even though he is not the top finisher at SHR. He is probably one of the faster guys at SHR. Starting in 6th, though, I think he may have outkicked his coverage just a little bit. Now, if this were dirt, I think Chase Briscoe, this would be a great pick, but it's not. We're racing on the concrete. Practice 23rd in single lap, 16th and 10 lap consecutive average, has an 18th place average finish. Finished 27th in the fall last year. I just don't like his starting spot. Even though you want to kind of start up front to stay up front at Bristol, it kind of reminds me a lot of a Stenhouse, or Carson Hocevar. He just gets impatient and does dumb things. Not that he's not fast, he just has a tendency to do dumb things. So with that being said, don't love the Chase Briscoe play with him starting in 6. Eric Jones, who is a much smarter driver, but is not... he was 33rd in single lap, did not do a 10-lap consecutive average, so his practice speeds were way off. He was part of the second group, if I remember correctly. So starting in 15th, he finished 24th in the fall race last year, but that was with the crappy Chevy that he was driving. They just had an awful year last year. He's showing better speed with the Toyotas this year, but still unknown. And he had a bad race last week at Phoenix, and typically they kind of come in pairs or more. So, with that being said, I think he's starting a little too far up for what I want, or he's not starting far enough up front. Kind of stuck in that. I don't know. I don't like the Eric Jones play this week. The potential's there. He's got a 12.2 average finish. He's got a 14.1 average finish over 11 total starts. It's a coin toss, and I decided to go tails, and it flipped heads. So I'm being a little funny about that. But so I'm a little faded off on that. Daniel Suarez, I mean, kind of the same thing. This is not the best track for Daniel. He's got an average finish 21.2. He finished 21st in this race. Last year, he's only got 2 top 20s. He is starting in 28th, so there is some place differential potential here with Daniel. And he was okay in practice, but I think he was in the first group. 11th in single lap speed. Did not do a 10-lap consecutive average. So, with that being said, 20th on my ranking, 15 to 20% as a potential place differential. Guys, the ownership for there. Michael McDowell, starting in 7th, practice in 7th, 10-lap consecutive average was 11th. He's got a 13th place average finish over the last 5 races here. He's kind of starting up front and finishing up front at Bristol. Doesn't have any top 5s, but his speed has been much better this year. He's been much more consistent than he's ever been with the car. They're definitely in the Ford camp now. They're getting a lot of support from Ford. I mean, he's got the potential. I just don't like his starting spot. And I don't think he gets much. I don't think he gets into the top 5. But does he start where he finishes at 7th and at 6,800? That's probably enough value there to have him in your lineups. You could almost fit him. I mean, with that lineup I shared earlier, you could almost fit a Michael McDowell in that group. So, Noah Gragson, who has been the most consistent driver at Stewart-Haas Racing this year, has shown great speed. His practice speeds were pretty good. He was 15th in single lap, 9th in 10-lap consecutive average. He was in the first group, with that being said. And we don't have any cup data on Noah Gragson, but we do have Xfinity data, and he always ran the Xfinity series really, really well here. Now, I mean, driving the junior motorsports cars at Bristol, and he is aggressive, leads to running well at Bristol, especially in Xfinity. Cup, that's a little bit harder to say. But starting 22nd, we've got some place differential here. I think starting in the 20s, he's probably one of my favorite picks in the 20 of guys that are starting in the 20s. So he's been much better than he was last year. Happy to see that. I was always a Noah Gragson fan when he was at Xfinity, so I'm hoping that this season is a comeback year for Noah Gragson. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 6,700, starting in 27th. He was 22nd in single lap, 25th in 10-lap consecutive average, and his average finish is 27th. I kind of think he finishes where he starts. He did finish 10th in this race last year, but that was a little bit fluky in my opinion. This track has a love-hate relationship with aggressive drivers, and Ricky Stenhouse is an aggressive driver. If they hit on it, it works. If they are slightly off, it's rough. So I am a fade on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. this week. I just don't like the combination of what's going on, and his practice speeds were not that great. So, Josh Berry, glad to see Josh Berry found some speed. I think he also just kind of hit qualifying at the right times, because starting in 2nd for Josh Berry, even though he is a short track expert, this is the first time he's going to be racing the Cup Series at Bristol. He just outkicked his coverage. His practice speeds were 26th and 24th. He was part of the second group, so his car was set up a little bit better than everybody else's for qualifying. But he disqualified way too well, in my opinion. I think he's lucky to finish in the top 10. I think he's going to be actually lucky to finish in the top 15 or 20. And with starting in second, that's just too much downside potential on place differential. So I am faded off completely of Josh Berry. Corey LaJoie at 6,400. Corey LaJoie, he's not great at these short tracks. As we saw last week at Phoenix, that's not one of his best tracks. Bristol is definitely not one of his best tracks. He's got a 26.2 average finish over the last 5 races, 27.3 for the last 11 all time, and he finished 25th in the fall race. So I think he outdid his coverage starting in 18th. Now, I agree that the Spire cars are much better, much faster, but this is asking a lot to finish in the top 10 at Bristol for Corey. And I'm a Corey LaJoie fan, but I think the best he gets is maybe 15th, and that's not going to be enough, even with the value of 6,400. Austin Dillon, who, like I've just said earlier, has just had the worst luck of anybody in NASCAR this year. Wrong place, wrong time. Well, part of that has to do with qualifying. Well, what did Austin Dillon go do? Qualified 31st. Qualified back in the muck. He's going to be stuck in the muck. And at Bristol, that can end up being a really bad day. And I don't like the starting spot. I don't like his practice speeds. He was 35th in single lap. Didn't do a 10-lap consecutive average. Looks like they're just struggling on the setup of this car. I feel for Austin Dillon, but it's just, I'm not willing to take much of a gamble. Now, there is place differential potential here with Austin Dillon, but until his luck turns around, I'm going to be fading off of Austin Dillon. So I do have some ownership on him, but it's because he's starting in 30. Austin Cindric, 6,200, starting in 21st. This track has not been kind to Austin Cindric, and this style track is not very good for Austin Cindric. It's just a bad match. 27th in single lap, 28th in 10-lap consecutive average practice, 26th average finish. Now, the sample size is only 2 races, but yeah. I just think he's starting too far up. I'm a complete fade on Austin Cindric this week. AJ Allmendinger, 6,100, starting in 30th. Now, AJ's got an 18.5 average finish. Now, the sample size is only 2. And, I like the AJ Allmendinger play better than I like the Austin Dillon play. And the car looks pretty cool. Mountain Dew and Cheetos. 2 of my favorites. Even though they're so bad for you. But either way. Yeah. I don't love the AJ play. I don't hate the AJ play. Also, Colleague has not been super fast. We're going to need to see some carnage happen for AJ to end up having a good day. So, don't love it, don't hate it. Starting in 30th, there's place differential here. I've got some ownership in him. It's 10 to 15%. Like I said, I like it better than the Austin Dillon play. I like it better than the Corey LaJoie play. Do I like it better than a Ross Chastain play? Absolutely not. In fact, I think I like Carson Hocevar better than AJ. I think Carson's coming up here shortly. John Hunter Nemechek, $6,000, starting in 26, 10-lap, 10th in single lap, 10th in 10-lap. 2 top 20s in the last 5 races, which I think both of them were in 2020 before he decided to go back to trucks and then Xfinity and now back to Cup. But either way, even when he's raced Xfinity and trucks here, he has always performed very, very well. Now, the question is, can he get up there? Can he get out of the muck? Potentially. Don't hate the play, don't love the play. There is place differential here. and it is $6,000. So it gives you kind of that room to kind of have that Chris Buescher and two potential dominators. I mean, Chris Buescher could easily be a dominator for this race tomorrow, so don't take that out of the equation either. But John Hunter Nemechek is not. I mean, if you're running 10 lineups, I mean, I'd definitely probably have him in two. As an alternate to an Austin Dillon or Carson Hocevar or somebody along those lines. So I don't mind the John Hunter Nemechek play. Ryan Preece, who is really good at short tracks, has a 12.5 average finish over 4 of the last 5 races here. Starting in 25th, SHR is showing better speed. He finished 12th in this race last year, and he is starting in 25th at 5,900. I like this play. I like this play probably better than the AJ play, better than the John Hunter play, definitely better than the Austin Dillon play. So at this price point, the Ryan Preece play really might fit into running those 2 to 3 high-priced dominators with a Ryan Preece. So we definitely have some options down here in the $6,000, $6,100 range and lower. And Ryan Preece is a good play here, starting in 25th. Like I said, his practice speeds were not great, but I'm telling you, practice was screwy to watch today. The first group was so much faster than the second group. So it's going to be fascinating to see what tomorrow's race brings. But Ryan Preece finishes road course or short tracks very well. And then we've got Carson Hocevar, $5,800. Practice speeds were not great. He was 31st in single lap, did not do a 10-lap consecutive average. He finished 11th in this race last year. Fire's been running pretty good. Starting in 35th, I mean, there's not much place to go but up. Now, the guy starting in 36, Ross Chastain, I think will easily pass Carson Hocevar. But, I mean, Carson's been finishing races this year again. He did that last year in this car. He has shown a lot more maturity. He's shown a lot more patience. And I think if Carson can just hang around, stay on the lead lap. Now, do I think he gets into the top 10? Probably not. But if he gets into the top 15 or even top 20 at $5,800 starting 35th, I mean, that's a real good pairing with Ryan Preece. So I definitely don't mind the Carson Hocevar play. I love and hate this 35th starting spot just because history has told us that, I mean, only 1 or 2 drivers starting in the 30s ends up even in top 15 on average in points for Draftkings. So history says it's not great, but I mean, maybe this year's a different year. Practice was definitely weird. Todd Gillen starting in 24th. He was 18th in single lap, 13th in 10-lap consecutive average. So he's good in practice. He's been having quietly a pretty decent year so far this year. I don't think he gets... If he gets into the top 20, he's going to barely get in the top 20. I don't think this is a top 10 style track for Todd. He did finish 16th. He's got an average finish of 17th. I don't know. But I don't think there's enough place differential for him to finish 17th and end up being in the optimal lineup. Maybe the top 15 in points. Carson looks like a fruit basket. Yeah, he is he's also like 6'5", and I think he might weigh 150 pounds. So yeah, he's an interesting looking dude. There are a lot of interesting looking guys that drive race cars. But Todd Gillen, I mean, starting in 24th, even if he gets to 17th, I don't know if that is enough at 5,700. I don't think it is. So, and I don't think he's a top 10. And he'd have to get into the top 10 for it really to become valuable for Todd Gillen. So, Zane Smith, $5,500, starting in 16th. Pretty decent in practice speeds, but he was in, I think, the first group. I really have to start putting a little italic, a little something over here that indicates if they're in practice 1 or practice 2, because it's really starting to show that there's a difference between the two practice sessions. But Zane Smith, 5,500, starting 16th. I think he outkicked his coverage. I don't think Zane Smith stays up close to 16th. I think he finishes probably best 20th, probably closer to 25th. But, you know, I mean, Zane ran a pretty good truck race tonight, so we'll have to see. I just don't love this play. I'm not willing to risk it. Same thing with Daniel Hemrick at $5,400, starting in 20th. Practice speeds were okay. He was 24th and 15th. We don't have a whole lot of past history with Daniel Hemrick here, other than earlier than 5 races ago. He had 2 starts where he had a 21st place average finish. Well, that average finish isn't going to be good enough starting in 20th. So I'm faded off of Daniel Hemrick. He's just starting too far up. And Harrison Burton is starting way too far up, in my opinion. He was decent in practice. He was 13th and 21st, but 22nd place average finish for Harrison Burton. And what have you done for me lately? I mean, other than a road course at Indy like 2 years ago, I can't remember the last time that Harrison Burton was decent. He's had little spots where he's been decent at tracks, but Harrison Burton's got to get this figured out, or he's going to have to take the route of John Hunter Nemechek and go back to trucks and Xfinity and reprove himself. So, Justin Haley at 5,200, starting in 32nd, and that Rick Ware car. I mean, they've had better speed this year, but I'm not sure he gets into the top 25. And I think even at 5,200, I think he's going to have to finish at least there, if not better. And I'm not sure he does. So I don't love the Justin Haley play this week. This is not one of his better tracks. So I'm faded off of Justin Haley. I mean, I've got some usage because it's what was left and it fit. And I liked it better than Kaz Grala, starting in 33rd. We don't have any history of Kaz Grala here, and he was not that great in practice, and he was not great in qualifying. I just don't think we're going to get much out of this. So, all right, so quick recap. The guys that I like a lot that I think are going to be Dominator-esque type. The Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Chris Buescher, I think is going to be a highly owned prospect who could easily come through the field right along with Ross Chastain. But Ryan Blaney, I think, starts up front, stays up front, easily could potentially lead 200 laps tomorrow. So those are kind of the guys that I like the best. For value, for kind of digging down, I like the Ryan Preece. I don't mind the Carson Hocevar. Guys I don't like Eric Jones' play. I don't like the Josh Berry play. I don't like the Austin Cindric, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Zane Smith, Kaz Grala, Justin Haley, or Harrison Burton. I don't like any of those, and they just don't fit. I mean, the Justin Haley, Kaz Grala, if you literally have $5,000 left to spend to make your other 5 line up, I mean, it's worth a shot, but it's a shot in the dark. John Hunter Nemechek's kind of in that boat. Daniel Hemrick is starting too far up. Austin Dillon, who just has the worst luck. Not really ready to roll that dice. Todd Gillen, I don't think finishes much better than where he starts. Same thing with Corey LaJoie. So, I mean, pretty much the value side, maybe Alex Bowman. Chase Briscoe at 7,300 is worth a potential shot, but he's starting in 6. Yeah, I mean, the guys that are starting up front are going to be good, and the guys that are starting in the back that are worth it are expensive. As you see, Ross Chastain at $8,500, Ty Gibbs at $8,000. And that's not Ty Gibbs' correct starting spot. He's starting much further back than that, 34th. So, yeah, don't love. There's a lot of guys I don't like, and there's a lot of guys I do like, and it's expensive. So fitting everything in appropriately is going to be a little bit of a tough call this week. So somebody's going to beat your favorite driver, unless your favorite driver happens to win tomorrow. And if it's Denny Hamlin, Lord help us all. I'm kidding. I don't mind the Denny Hamlin. I think he's kind of funny, even though he's a little arrogant. That's okay. It's Denny. I just kind of want to see Denny win a championship and be like, that's it. I'm done. I'm retiring. Bye. I'm going to go on 2311 and be done with this. But either way, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you tuning in. We will be back next week to review our first road course. And we'll get SVG back. We'll get a lot of road course ringers coming in. Along with, AJ will be in the Cup Series. Chase Elliott's fully healed. It's one of his favorite tracks. We've got Reddick and Larson, and we're going to have a lot of people to talk about next week. And it's going to be interesting. Because they also changed the car a little bit. It's the same setup, body style that they had at Phoenix. They're running that on road courses, so we'll have to wait and see. But I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Good luck tomorrow. It should be Bristol's always fun. And I'm glad that it's not on dirt. That was a fun experiment. It was fun to watch for a couple of years, but I'm glad we're back on the concrete. All right. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy the race. We will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
Get a good deep breath. Get ready to roll here. Only about one thing tonight, getting the W's, so got to be around the end to do that. Get ready to roll tonight, boys. Let's go have some fun.
Don't get me any more fired up than I already am.
All the way to the checker. You're fine. Nobody's got to run. Checker time, baby!
Hell yeah.
Proud of you there, Matt. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day.
Great work, my man. Great work.
Keep putting yourself in position. We'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
Great job, guys.
Excellent work, my man. Excellent work. Thank you.
Man, that's awesome. Set out with a goal we got in here, bud. Thank you very much.
Really proud of you, man. Drove your butt off tonight. We had the fastest car here, bud.
Probably killed our deal there. Just feel like I gave one away.
Yeah, boys. Way to rebound. Great job.
Great job, bud. Really good job. Appreciate you hanging in there with us all weekend.
What a weekend. Good job. Thank you.